Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to open up a discussion with you all to talk about whether or not you think dupes are bad. Now, one thing I wanted to establish right off the bat is the difference between an item that's counterfeit and a dupe, because to me, they're two totally different items. Counterfeit means that another brand basically steals logos or some sort of trademarked distinguishing style element from a garment, a shoe, a purse, any product, and then slaps it on their cheap version and tries to pass off the cheap version as the actual real luxury thing. Whereas to me, a dupe is kind of in that gray area in the sense that a lesser brand is not ripping off logos or trademarked aspects of a luxury item, but they are definitely producing a lower cost item that clearly is inspired by a higher end version. A great example of this is the iconic puzzle bag from Loewe versus this dupe from Quince, and you'll notice they look pretty much the same except for the glaringly obvious difference in price. But we'll come back to that. And the reason I'm so interested in this topic is because, as you guys know, I stopped purchasing fast fashion about 2 years ago in favor of investing in more sustainable brands. I don't overconsume anymore. I'm very methodical and careful about what I'm purchasing and why. That being said, I'm also not willing to just spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars on one item just because it's quote unquote sustainable or quote unquote luxury, especially when brands typically provide zero transparency when it comes to how they end up justifying the retail cost of that item. But I started thinking about generally what the consequences are when consumers purchase a dupe. So the two greater picture questions I want to flush out with you today have to do with whether or not one of the consequences of purchasing a dupe is that ultimately we're setting ourselves up for a world in which fast fashion rules supreme and luxury brands basically become extinct. And by doing so, are we pushing creative directors and designers out of the job? So obviously, accessibility is a huge factor in this debate, this conversation, because a lot of people, myself included, have said, I simply cannot economically afford the higher priced item. I have to buy the lower priced duplicate. But one of the questions I started asking myself was, can you really not afford this? Or is it more about you don't want to wait to save for it? Because admittedly for me, in the past, when I was over consuming fast fashion, it was all about how do I get more? I just want more, 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 more. I didn't want to have just one beautiful item hanging in my closet. I wanted to have 20 cheap things hanging in my closet. And I had to get honest about whether or not I really wanted to be dedicated enough and exhibit some self-control to save up for the higher priced item instead of just these knee-jerk shopping sprees, no thought, just because I wanted that Pinterest massive walk-in closet filled with as much stuff as I could fit in there. And so this got me thinking too, like, okay, I would ask myself, why is your inclination to not want to save for that item? Do you feel entitled to have something now? Do you just not have the self-discipline to save for that item? At the end of the day, do you just not see the value in the higher priced item? And these are all questions that I literally had to ask myself every time I wanted to make a purchase, even as I was transitioning out of this massive consumption of fast fashion in favor of just putting my money behind brands that are produced ethically, that are more sustainable, and at the end of the day are higher priced because they're higher end. So for me, if I'm eyeing the more expensive item, if it's what I really have my heart set on, I'm still way more likely to buy it if I can find it secondhand, especially in excellent or pristine condition, versus just buying it full price at retail. To be totally transparent, we are a middle-class family, and even when saving for something, I still have a threshold for what I'm comfortable spending for that item. I'm also not willing to go into credit card debt to buy anything, so if there's something expensive that I want, I have to save for it. I also had to start asking myself whether or not I saw a value in delayed gratification, right? Because if I'm making these knee-jerk fast purchases and at the end of the day, I don't want to wait to save for something. Ultimately, I was robbing myself of the joy of the slow accumulation of things, which for me helps me to savor what I'm purchasing. It helps make that purchase feel really special and unique because I'm savoring it. I'm kind of marinating in the process of looking at that item, thinking about that item, saving up for that item, allocating money for that item. So when it comes to purchasing that item, I've already set aside money for it. So there's no guilt in purchasing it. There's no anxiety about, oh, can I actually really afford this? Am I sweating bullets when the credit card bill comes? So that whole process of delayed gratification, again, if we're just knee-jerk reaction, always going for the dupe, are we not robbing ourselves of the joy of delayed gratification and the joy of savoring a purchase instead of, once again, this just very fast, knee-jerk, entitled, I want it, therefore I'm going to get it approach to shopping? Oh my gosh, I love this question. It's another one I ask myself all the time. So a couple years ago, I was in the market for a black leather jacket. And it just so happened that I got my hands on one from All Saints. It was their iconic bow fern. I still wanted to see if I could find a cheaper version, so I found one on Quince. In fact, I made an entire video dedicated to a side-by-side comparison of these two jackets. And once I did receive both of them and I could try them on side by side and see how they fit, how they felt, how they looked, I just knew in my heart of hearts, I am not going to be happy with the less expensive version because it simply could not compete in value and feel to the more expensive option. And then just bringing this full circle, thinking about the creativity and the talent and the time and the energy and the love of a designer or a creative director, what they put into creating a product, to me, is worth something. Now, I'm not saying that everything in my closet has to have a $5,000 price tag on it, but to me personally, there's something to be said for acquiring a piece and paying a little bit more to have somebody's vision in your possession. I just think that's really, really cool. And for me, the appeal with that is because it's becoming the anomaly, right? It's becoming the minority in a majority of fast fashion machine produced items. So those handcrafted pieces or those items that are really thought out and they go through a design process, they literally are born as a concept in someone's mind. And that person over potentially years sees that item come to fruition, come to reality. I love the idea of saving up for an item like that. That's what I want to have in my sphere, in my closet. So for me, that really has been the driving factor as to whether or not I personally want to buy a dupe versus enjoying the entire process from planning for that item, saving for that item, marinating in delayed gratification, and then the actual acquisition of that item. That has become paramount to me. But I also think it's fair to ask if luxe and higher priced sustainable brands are kind of setting themselves up for a world in which a dupe of their product does come on the market, given how much they are charging for the real thing. You know, again, thinking about Loewe versus Quince, I'll give Loewe the fact that they are a storied brand. They've been around for 178 years. So I think that's saying something. And I do love the fact that the puzzle was the debut bag for Loewe creative director Jonathan Anderson back in 2015, as well as the fact that Loewe is a storied brand. It's been around for 178 years. They're known for their craft. And this puzzle bag in particular is composed of 75 leather pieces that are cut with precise geometry. But As much as I love all these things, I think they're fabulous and I don't want to discount it. I still would love to know as a consumer how Loewe figures all of these wonderful things into justifying a $3,500 price tag. I don't know why across fashion brands and everything in general, the reasoning behind the price point just tends to be shrouded in mystery because, again, I'd be much more willing as a consumer to pay more for something if I understood every dollar that's going into the ultimate retail price of that item. I will say this for Quince, they do a really good job of offering transparent pricing, and it's fascinating to see, okay, how much this particular item that Quince is selling, what the cost was for manufacturing, what the cost was for supplies, what the cost was for even something like a credit card fee. And you can see the totality of that amount and then, kind of reconcile it with the retail price Quince is charging for one of their items. I also want to make clear that this example is not done in an attempt to beat up on Loewe. I think it's a beautiful storied brand. It would be an honor and a privilege to have one of their items in my collection. I just think this puzzle bag is a great case study for comparing the real thing to a dupe. Okay, guys, so that'll do it for the topic of whether or not dupes are bad. And again, I just love the idea of talking about why we invest in what we invest in when it comes to fashion, clothing, our closets, our wardrobes. But I cannot wait to hear your take on this topic, especially if you are somebody who either just inherently always wants the dupe and you don't want to pay more for the higher end item. Talk to me a little bit about why. But then I also want to hear from those of you who just really do not like dupes. You don't feel like you'd be satiated by the fake. You really do just plan and save for the real thing. I want to hear about that experience as well. But in any event, thank you guys so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you're having a good one, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.